Hey guys, so I'm back in the West, back in the UK, Durham City to be precise at the moment, and I'm about to head off and see my family. I did, however, say that I would make a video about nativity, and I should really do it before Christmas Day itself. And it's not the traditional nativity I want to speak about, for all I will talk about the traditional nativity, but for it's the nativity that has been missed. And because the nativity has been missed, we see the problems that we see on the planet. The literal interpretation, standing alone, of the nativity has been around for thousands of years. But it would seem that a key component must be missing from society. Otherwise, if this is the ultimate truth, and this is the way that we are saved, why is the planet in the state it is in? Why does every single Western community have that outlet for that faith, yet every community also has immeasurably more persons sitting in bars, pubs, taking drugs, and everything else in between, to varying degrees in each and every community, from village to town to city? Now, in practicing the internal nativity, I've become very blessed in my life. There was a time in my life where I had to have others believe as I believed. My need for that has gone. There was a time in my life where I had certain fears regarding beliefs. This has gone. There was a time in my life where I had to have faith that there was God. That has gone. I no longer need to have faith and believe in God, because I know God by practicing the nativity inside myself. Now, this Christmas, many of us will indulge and embark upon the Christmas feast that we all have. On the 26th, Boxing Day as we would call it, the moon enters my star sign Aries. So I am already planning a temperate Christmas. I will hold temperance as best I can, for all it is tradition. But tradition versus the nurturing of the chrism is not really so important to me, because I'll be more functional going into my new year if I have and hold that temperance going in to the celebration with my family of Christmas and the solstice and the end of what has been a very powerful and beautiful year for myself and Fritzy and everybody around us. Now, the traditional nativity will be the forefront of many a child's mind and many a person's mind. Children do nativity plays. Churches hold nativity plays these days. And sitting in most family households will be a nativity as a Christmas decoration. But how different each family household would be if they could look upon that nativity scene inside their home and realize that right there is the promise of happiness and health for all of their children. We've become a very uncivilized society in as we can't guarantee happiness to our children. But certain cultures and communities can on the planet, even without high levels of material comfort, which is where we are aiming and seeking to find that happiness for our children. But we do not. Often we provide bad health and unhappiness via that avenue of consumerism and material goods. But right there, sitting, is an allegorical key to the happiness and the health of every person inside a family home with a nativity scene and beyond. Now, the literal nativity scene doesn't lose anything from this. God has made it in such a way. Such is his design. As I said in my last video, such is his design that the most important light for human survival passes through into its resurrection and crucifixion at this time of year. Even now it is sitting in the tomb waiting to be resurrected as I speak. the most important thing for our psychological, emotional and spiritual well-being, sits within us, nurturing the Christ within us, which can only be done by living a life in line with the teachings of the man Jesus Christ. For when you obey those teachings and you live a life of righteousness and temperance, in service to God and service to Christ, then you are able to receive the wondrous gifts of the chrism by nurturing it and anointing yourself with the oil of gladness. But psychologically, we still are left with a huge void within ourselves, because how do you have the ability to follow the Christ? And this is what is missing, this is what is absent. Show all those children this nativity scene and tell them of this wondrous event and this person who came to save the world, this person who came to help you, but never tell them how to tune in and to do what he asked, to live as he instructed, to do greater works than he, for he will have gone to the Father, to take his own words. Now the beauty of this internal nativity is that many people on the planet who know nothing of the nativity still live out that which Christ asked them to live out. They still live out a life in line with God, and they still have their own internal nativity. They just don't use the symbology that we would use here in the West, or that is being lost inside our Western culture into a literalist state. So the story of the nativity goes that you have a husband and wife, Joseph and Mary, and they must give birth to a child of absolute purity. To do that, they head to Bethlehem and they travel and try to find a place to have this child to physically give birth. And every time they go to an inn, they are rejected, and the inn says, "I'm sorry, there's no room here." And eventually they are directed to give birth in a quiet place among what we would perceive to be non-material comfort, surrounded by animals. And as they do, shepherds who were busy watching their flocks come to pay them a visit. And at the same time, 3 magi being Iranian astrologers, come from the east. And whilst all that is going on, a very profound and bright light that we call the Star of Bethlehem hangs above the point where this child is born. That story is no different to all of the allegories I've spoken about in the Bible. If you want to give birth to the Christ within yourself, you have to find a space of absolute purity within you. You have to find the Virgin Mary inside your own consciousness. When you find that space of virgin purity, absolute virtuousness, then you can begin to give birth to the Christ within you. But as you move around and you look for a space to do this, and you go to the inn is the carnal mind, the noisy, chattering carnal mind. And an inn is so busy and so loud, you cannot give birth to the Christ within there. You can't give birth to the purity in there. So there's no room at the inn. There's no room at the carnal mind. No different to why Jonah had to tithe inside the will. He had to surrender that carnal mind so as he too could give birth to the Christ within him. As it progresses, the shepherds come. And the shepherds who have watched their flocks, the watchers are the watchers of their thoughts. Those who watch their thoughts are those who can live by Christ's teachings and nobody else. Because only then can you have temperance, only then can you do as he asked, only then can you do as he instructed. If you do not watch your thoughts, you cannot have the discipline to do these things. It's not possible, because you will give attention to the wrong thoughts, the wrong behaviors, the wrong habits, and you will separate and sever yourself from the behaviors of righteousness that are conducive with a person who can live in line enough with the teachings of Jesus Christ to give birth to a Christ within themselves. And when you watch those thoughts and you find a pure space of consciousness within you, you find the Virgin Mary within you, and you go and you realize that there's no space at the end to give birth, because you can't give birth to the Christ in your carnal mind, because the carnal mind is not subject to the laws of God, as it is written. Then you go to the quiet space within you. And as you're watching your thoughts, and you find that virtuous aspect of your consciousness, and you find the quiet space which actually dwells within your five senses, within the animal nature, surrounded by the animals, as Jesus was when he was born, then the great light of God can come before you and above you. And when that great light of God nurtures you and saturates you with all that you need and all that you possibly could want, and the photons within there enter within you, travelling upon those angles of light, which is just another modern day term for the messengers of light, which we called angels, photons, angels. Then you throw open your right hemisphere, because you anoint yourself with the oil of gladness, because you live righteously. You have watched your thoughts. You have not overindulged in those things you should not. You have walked in line with Christ in action, deed, and thought, and speech. You have realized that the carnal mind, there's no space there, because that's the inn. It's too noisy to give birth to the Christ. You've gone to the space in the stable to give birth to the Christ from your virgin consciousness. You've done it by watching your flocks, by watching your thoughts and severing from those thoughts and attention to those thoughts that are going to cause you harm. And as you do, you throw open the gate to the east, and the wisdom arrives. The wise men, the magi, arrive from the east. And as the magi arrive from the east, it is complete. The Christ within you is born. You open up the dormant aspects of your mind, and you bring in that spiritual energy from the right hemisphere, or the east. The promised land is in the east. And as you do, you awaken to the Christ within you, and you awaken to a life walking in Christ. You cannot live as Christ asked without that process. Some people may be blessed enough to be born in a way where they have complete dominion over their carnal mind. They do not know this process, so they automatically, naturally do it, but most do not. Most live in a system with a false light reality which is dominated by the enemy. And that enemy prowls and seeks to separate as many of us as possible from the Christ. Once you watch your thoughts and you bring in that wisdom from the east, you've achieved something that can liberate you from being unhealthy, from being unhappy, can liberate your children from the same problems. It can alter your focus so you realize that there is no joy to be found outside yourself. It can help you to realize that the truest joys your children will not find under the Christmas tree on Monday morning. And in fact, that we might even do our children in the West a great harm by persistently externalizing beautiful times of the year and persistently overstimulating their need for material goods and consumerism and placing that joy beyond themselves. I see children suffer without materiality. Material comfort's a necessity. A child who sleeps on the floor and does not eat is not as comfortable as a child who has a bed and eats what they need to eat. But does a child need so many plastic trinkets in the house that they do not know where to turn? Or do they just need a pen and paper? Perhaps a pet? Perhaps a brother or sister? How often do you hear the jokes that children played with the box from their toys and not the toys on Christmas Day? You can bring a form of joy into a life that the Buddha called rapture. It's a joy where you build up, you anticipate. A joy that is felt in addiction, which is why we have addicts. People build up and they anticipate a need for alcohol. They get it, they feel so happy. Finally, I'm in the pub with my friends, I'm drinking. They get the rapture. But it's up and it's gone. This is not a persistent happiness. A persistent, stable happiness is what we should seek for all of ourselves. And inside the nativity story, there is the solution to that problem. There is the persistent happiness. There is the temperance, which in turn gives us good health. There is our peace of mind. Instead, we provide rapture at the holiday season for our children. They become overstimulated. Finally, it's here, then it's gone, and children even cry on Christmas night because it's over. There needs to be some equilibrium. There has to be some balance. In every culture on the planet, there has been great masters, great spiritual sages, yogis, gurus, messiahs who have tried their absolute best and given their lives to tell you this. And the teachings left behind by each one are no different. Just as we finally give birth to the Christ within us and the wise men come from the east, so the Buddha sat under the Bodhi tree and the morning star rose in the eastern sky and he was enlightened. Enlightened beneath the fig tree, the inwardly blossoming flower. He blossomed inwardly, which can only be done by not going to the inn. Only be done by finding the virgin consciousness inside you. Can only be done by giving birth to the Christ within you. Can only be done by watching your thoughts. The Buddha had his own nativity. Jesus had his own nativity. Zoroaster had his own nativity. Krishna had his own nativity. And I have my own nativity every single day. And so can you. Many of you do. And if we all share that gift with our children this Christmas, or if it's not on Christmas Day, the year ahead, we'll create a generation of the most powerful, healthy, and happy children. And they won't be sold this lie by the enemy of consumerism and emotional happiness to be found externally. We'll revert back to a utilitarian system where we buy things based upon need. And we can return things like Christmas to a time of love and sharing and praise instead of a time of shopping. So, we should all seek to have the nativity, but only the one inside of us, because that's the one that counts. Now, the literal nativity in itself you can't have for yourself. You can have the story of Christ's birth, and this does not take away from it in any which way, shape or form. It adds to it. It gives it a deep, profound meaning every day in your life, and that's why God did it. Many people, they can't stand it that there might be another layer to it because they've missed it. But because they haven't had their own nativity, they can't maturely say, wow, wish I'd saw that. Instead, they reject it. I don't like that. It's not normal. It's not what I know. But it doesn't take away from the birth of Christ. Not at all. It amplifies it because it brings it into a daily internal working of you. Your soul has its own nativity if it wishes to embrace it. Just as this wonderful day of the year where people get together and share good times has its own nativity to share. I take nothing away from the literal story of Christ. Nothing at all. I just see that whether you agree with my interpretation of the nativity or not, that which I speak about, that watching your thoughts and opening the eastern side of yourself, the spiritual hemisphere, and giving birth to a state of pure consciousness within you which is free from addiction and free from sin. And that there's a practical way to do it by managing your thoughts and not giving attention to the thoughts that lead you away from that. Then even if you're a pure literalist and you don't agree with my allegorical interpretation, then you have to agree without any doubt that what I assign to those allegorical interpretations is the solution. Because with it, you can be strong enough, everyone can be strong enough to live as Christ asked, and to do greater works than he, for he will have gone to the Father. Merry Christmas, guys, and look at your nativity if you have one, and think of what I've said, and work out if you want your own nativity this year, in here, and in here. If you haven't had one yet, it'll change your life forever. And those around you. If you don't believe me, look at all that happened in Tanzania. I accredit that to my union with God, and I accredit my union with God to him teaching me how to have my own internal nativity. God bless. Bye.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe, as it really helps us to grow the channel and with it help more children here in Tanzania. Also, don't forget you can support our work by sharing with children in crisis here, be it sharing for a particular need or even sharing one-on-one support for education, housing, food and medical care. It can be done for as little as the cost of a cup of coffee a week back in the West after all. Just visit www.sharetanzania.co.uk to find out more. Lastly, remember you can also support us via Patreon, www.patreon.com/featherstail, and help keep us here in Tanzania to continue our work. The links for the website and for the Patreon are in the description box of this video. Love and light, guys. See you soon.